I never thought asking my son when the wedding was would end in a knife to the heart. "Troy," I asked, standing by the phone in my living room on a muggy September afternoon, "do y'all have a date yet?" The pause was long, too long. Then Brittany leaned into the frame. She was FaceTiming with him and smiled like she'd just won something. "We got married yesterday," she said, her voice honeyed but hard. "Only close people were invited." I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream, but it felt like ice water had poured straight through my chest. My jaw clenched tight. I stared at Troy, my only child, waiting for him to say something, to blink, to shrug, to explain this was some sick joke. He didn't. He looked down. Behind him, I could see balloons, a string quartet, her mother laughing, her brother raising a toast. I recognized that rooftop from Brittany's Instagram just hadn't known it was the venue. They hadn't told me. Not a word. The dress I'd picked out for her hung in my closet, lavender satin still wrapped in tissue. I'd spent $200 on it, along with new low heels I hadn't worn since retirement. I'd saved $1,000 for the wedding gift, cash I'd planned to give them the night of the rehearsal dinner. Except there hadn't been one. Not for me. My phone buzzed again. A notification from Instagram. Brittany had posted a photo, a perfect sunlit scene of them kissing in front of a white arch, her caption reading, "Surrounded by our closest hearts." #WalkerWedding 2024. I stood there, barely breathing, while they acted like nothing was wrong. Like I was some distant cousin they didn't have space for. I'd paid their rent, $500 a month, for 3 years. I'd covered their groceries, even helped with Brittany's dental work. When they got engaged, I threw a little party for them, bought cupcakes from that overpriced bakery Brittany liked. And now I was learning I wasn't even considered family enough to witness their vows? No call, no invite, just a cold truth delivered like gossip. Only close people were invited. They smiled one more time, and then the screen went black. I sat down, shaking, in my own house, 5404 River Birch Lane, where I've lived since 2001, and realized the most devastating part of all. They didn't forget me. They had excluded me. And that's when it started. The unraveling, the ledger of my love, and their quiet erasure of it. Morning after, I sat at my kitchen table in my robe, hands wrapped around a warm mug I'd refilled twice without drinking. I picked up a black spiral-bound notebook from the drawer and opened it to a blank page. At the top, I wrote my name in clear, deliberate print, Denise Walker, age 65, retired paralegal. I stared at it for a while. The pen in my hand used to sign contracts, petitions, powers of attorney. At Gentry and Tate, I'd drafted affidavits so airtight they held up against the slickest defense attorneys. For 32 years, I'd dealt in precision and detail. I knew what words could do, and what it meant when someone chose not to use them. No one from that little wedding had called. Not Troy, not a cousin, not even a mass text. The house was quiet, only the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the wood floors interrupted the stillness. I could see out the sliding glass door into the back garden, where sunlight was filtering through the maple trees. It should have been a peaceful morning, one of my retirement routines. Tea, crossword, checking in on neighborhood cats, but nothing about it felt familiar. Even the light felt foreign. My business card was still tucked inside the front of my checkbook. Denise M. Walker, Senior Paralegal, Litigation Division. I'd laminated it the year before I retired, as a reminder of the work I'd done, the woman I'd been. I slid it out and placed it on the table next to my mug like it might anchor me to something steady. In the corner of the table, a slim stack of unopened envelopes waited. Bank of America pension statements, credit union newsletters, a circular from the pharmacy. Proof of a life responsibly lived. There was no noise from the upstairs bedroom Troy used to sleep in when he was little. I kept it clean, aired out. I thought maybe someday they'd visit and stay the night. Brittany had only been in it twice. She called it quaint. They had never brought over a single dish after I had my gallbladder surgery. But I hadn't kept score then. I do now. By mid-morning, I'd settled into the rhythm of the day, like muscle memory. I poured coffee into my favorite cobalt mug, the one with the chip on the handle, and took that first slow sip by the window. It was the same routine I'd followed nearly every morning since retirement. The light coming in from the east bathed the counter in gold, catching the shine on the glass fruit bowl and the faded crochet doily beneath it. After breakfast, I swept the hardwood floors, then mopped them with Murphy's oil soap, same as always. I moved with intention, not distraction. The lemony scent rose from the damp mop head as I passed over the entryway, the hallway, and back through the kitchen. I wiped down the cabinets, scrubbed the sink, cleaned the litter box I kept for the stray who'd started showing up last fall. A smoky gray tabby I called Bishop. He wasn't mine, not officially, but he came by every morning like clockwork, meowing, until I brought out a small saucer of wet food. Everything in my condo had its place. Clean, orderly, quiet. A 2-bedroom unit on River Birch Lane, fully paid off in March of 2009. I'd lived here nearly 15 years, long enough to know every sound the pipes made, when the sunlight hit just right in the afternoon, how the heat always pooled in the northwest corner of the living room by the baseboard vent. A few months ago, Brittany had glanced around during one of their drop-ins and said with a smile too sharp to be kind, "You sure keep it tidy for a woman your age." I'd laughed, brushing it off, but I remembered the way her eyes landed on my lace curtains, the inherited china cabinet, the hand-stitched throw pillows my sister Dolores had made before she passed. She never liked anything she couldn't price. That afternoon, I filed a maintenance request to fix the drip in the guest bathroom sink. The HOA was efficient, part of why I'd stayed. River Birch Owners Board might not seem like much to some, but they'd always done right by me. I knew everyone by name. Theo, the building superintendent, Miss Crandall from Unit 3B, who kept notes on everything, and Mr. Mendoza, who ran the security committee like a tight ship. This place, these routines, they weren't habits, they were choices. And I had earned every inch of this peace. I hadn't always felt this cold toward Brittany. There was a time I tried to understand her. A time I leaned into the hope that maybe she'd become part of us, not just part of Troy's life. Back in May of 2021, Troy came over alone, something he hadn't done in a while, and sat on the edge of the couch like he was asking for a favor he didn't want to name. He fidgeted with his keys. I remember it because I was cooking shrimp and grits, and the smell was just starting to bloom in the air. "Ma," he said, "Brittany's got another interview this week, but her lease is ending. Can she stay with me?" Then he added, before I could ask, "We found a little place on Sycamore, but the landlord wants the leaseholder to have a solid credit score. Mine's still." He trailed off, embarrassed. "Could you co-sign? Just for a bit." That, just for a bit, turned into 3 years. I drove with them to look at the unit on 307 Sycamore Street. It wasn't much, peeling paint on the shutters, a rusted fence, but Brittany lit up when she saw the open floor plan. She kept saying how much potential it had. Her tone was more relieved than excited. That's when I saw the cracks beneath the polish. She wasn't spoiled, just scared, drowning in student loan debt, juggling temp gigs, hopping between jobs that never stuck. And yet she held Troy's hand like he was her anchor. So I stepped in, signed the lease, paid the first month's rent, and set up a recurring transfer of $500 from my credit union to the landlord every 4th Friday. Brittany cried when I handed her the keys. She hugged me like family, said something about me being a real one. I remember believing her. Cynthia Barnes, my credit union manager for over a decade, raised an eyebrow when I came in to authorize the transfer. "You're sure you want to tie your account to their lease?" she asked gently, already typing. "These things tend to go long." I nodded. I told her it was temporary. It felt good to help. At first, I showed up with groceries some Sundays, took Brittany to her dental appointment when her insurance lapsed. I even helped set up their Wi-Fi router that first weekend. I believed supporting them meant building something stable. I didn't realize I was building a trap, one they'd happily stay in as long as the money flowed one way. On the morning of September 5th, I spread every receipt, bank statement, and Venmo transaction across my dining table like puzzle pieces. I needed to see it all, on paper, in ink, not just what I'd given, but what it had cost me to stay silent. The table was already scratched from years of use. It had been the heart of birthdays, Sunday dinners, and years of tax prep. Now it held a different ritual, accounting for love spent like currency. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Excel sheet I'd started keeping 2 years ago. Back then, it was just a way to track expenses for tax season. Somewhere along the way, it became a quiet ledger of all the ways I'd held that household up. Rent, $500 a month for 36 months. That was $18,000, steady as clockwork. Groceries, at least $150 a month. I rarely bought for just myself anymore. Brittany was picky, allergic to half the staples I kept. Almond milk, gluten-free pasta, wild-caught salmon, small indulgences that piled up. That was another $5,400. Her emergency dental procedure, the one that came after she cracked a molar chewing ice, $1,200 on my debit card. She'd cried in the passenger seat afterward, said she'd pay me back when her refund came. It never did. The engagement party I hosted last winter at the Baptist Center, catering from King's Table Barbecue, decorations from Party City, folding chairs I had delivered. I'd paid $2,100 when all was said and done. And that dress, soft ivory with a lace overlay she insisted on having, though she said she'd Venmo me later for half, that was $600, still unpaid. I tapped the calculator on my phone, slowly inputting the numbers again to make sure I wasn't exaggerating. $27,300. That wasn't even counting the little things. The rides, the gas money, the nights I stayed up waiting for a call that never came. May came by mid-afternoon with a grocery bag of pears and some of her famous zucchini bread. She saw the table, the spreadsheets, and the silence on my face. She didn't ask questions, just sat down, took one look at the figures, and said, "Baby, you don't need a lawyer to tell you this ain't right." I nodded but kept my voice low. I just needed to see it, in black and white. It had started with small things. Barely, they're moments I dismissed because I wanted to believe I mattered. I remembered one afternoon in August, about 2 weeks before the wedding date I thought hadn't been set. Brittany had invited me to lunch at Mama J's. I took it as a good sign. She never initiated time together. I put on a coral blouse and my Sunday earrings, even curled my edges, hoping maybe we were finally settling into something like respect. She slid into the booth across from me, already on her phone, tapping out messages with those long, coffin-shaped nails. I smiled and asked, "How's the planning coming?" She glanced up, blinked too slowly. "It's all kinda last minute. We're keeping it really casual." The waiter came by. "Malcolm, sweet boy, used to go to church with Troy when they were teens." I ordered fried catfish and collards. Brittany said she wasn't hungry, just got a side of mac and cheese. Said she was cutting back before the big day. I asked again, gently, whether they'd picked a venue or if she wanted help choosing a florist. She waved her hand like she was swatting away a fly. "Honestly, Miss Denise, we're just trying not to overthink it. It's going to be real intimate, nothing too fussy." I didn't push. I remember thinking maybe that was a good thing. Maybe they were saving for something else. A house, a future. But still, something in her voice made my stomach tighten. There was a blankness behind her smile, like I was being tolerated instead of invited in. Her phone buzzed again. She turned the screen away from me. I noticed the little bouquet emoji in the banner notification. I said nothing. We ate in near silence after that. I paid the bill, $60, including tip, and she thanked me with the same tone she used when I picked her up from that job interview last winter. That thank you voice, sugary and hollow. Back home, I texted Troy just to check in. He responded 3 hours later with a thumbs up emoji. No words. At the time, I told myself not to take it personally. Everyone's busy before a wedding. 5 days later, on the morning of September 10th, my phone buzzed with a Cash App request. Rent, urgent, $500. It came from Troy's account, but the note had a little red heart emoji at the end, something Brittany always used. I stared at it for a long minute, standing in my kitchen robe, the hem brushing against my ankles like a silent alarm. I didn't accept. Not yet. I sat down, opened the banking app, and just looked at the balance. More than enough to cover it, of course. But something in my chest bristled. My thumb hovered over the screen. 5 minutes later, a text came in from Brittany. "Hey, Miss Denise, just making sure the transfer went through. Rent's due tomorrow, and we're in a bit of a bind. Appreciate you." Followed by 3 crying, laughing emojis and a sun. Then another. "We hate to ask. It's just been hectic after the wedding." Loudly crying, folded hands. After the wedding. No apology. No mention of me not being invited, just rent, as if that thread hadn't snapped. I grabbed my purse and headed to the Bank of America on Hull Street, needing to see someone face to face. Angie was working the counter, a round-faced woman with soft eyes and a knowing voice. I'd seen her every month for nearly 3 years, back when I'd come in person to make the transfers before I set them up digitally. "Hey there, Miss Walker," she said. "Need help today?" I slid the phone across the counter, showing her the request. "I want to hold off. No transfer today." She nodded, then glanced at me more closely. "You sure about that?" Her voice dropped just enough for me to hear the concern. She wasn't being nosy. Angie knew patterns, knew when things shifted. "Yes," I said. "I'm sure." I walked out into the midday heat with no receipt, no withdrawal, just quiet resolve pressing against my ribs. By early evening, Brittany sent one more message. "We know we can count on you." I didn't reply. The old me would have felt guilt chewing the inside of her cheek raw. But that day, the silence felt like armor. By the following Sunday, word had begun to travel, not from them, but through whispers, looks, and the soft thud of betrayal landing where it hurt most, my church. It started in the fellowship hall at New Hope Baptist, just after service on September 15th. We were gathered around the punch bowl, paper plates in hand, when Sister Geraldine leaned in, her voice sugar-sweet but laced with something sour. "Heard your boy tied the knot last weekend. How lovely." Her eyebrows arched, not in celebration, but in question. I blinked. "I didn't attend." She nodded slowly, eyes widening just enough to signal what came next. "Oh, well, I'm sure it was a last-minute thing. Brittany said you'd forgotten the invite, said it must have been an honest mix-up." My breath caught like a snag in fabric. Forgotten the invite? I hadn't received one. Not a paper envelope, not an evite, not even a stray text. And now Brittany was peddling the lie that I'd somehow misplaced my own way into my son's wedding? Later that afternoon, in the hallway behind the sanctuary, Deacon Marshall approached me. "Don't take what folks say too hard," he said gently. "Sometimes folks just deflect guilt by rewriting the story." I nodded, but the ache had already rooted deep. It wasn't just exclusion anymore. It was erasure, wrapped in performance. Brittany had told our shared community, our spiritual home, that I'd simply forgotten, as if I were absent-minded, as if I were slipping. I sat alone in the back pew for the evening program, watching the light cast shadows through the stained glass. Troy hadn't reached out since the request. Brittany's only follow-ups were emojis and cheerful passive aggression. That night, my phone lit up with a forwarded group text, one I hadn't been included in originally, from Sister Linda. It was a string of congratulations to Brittany for pulling off a wedding with such grace and intimacy. At the bottom, a photo. Brittany, in her white dress, standing next to her beaming mother in front of the New Hope altar. Our altar. The same altar where Troy was baptized at 11, where I'd once knelt beside him, praying he'd find love, purpose, God's favor. I closed my messages without replying. There were no accidents here. No miscommunications, only calculated omissions, and a narrative being shaped without me. And I just started gathering the counterweight, the truth. The following evening, I sat out back on the porch, rocking slowly in the chair Troy helped me sand down 3 summers ago. It creaked in familiar rhythm, matching the low buzz of cicadas and the occasional bark from across the street. Dusk had pulled a lavender veil across the yard. I could smell the honeysuckle near the fence line, faint but steady. The same way my mother's perfume used to linger in a room long after she'd left. I dialed Troy. The phone rang 4 times before going to voicemail. I waited, then called again. This time, I got a voice memo instead of words. His voice came through quiet but clipped, like he was reading from a script under his breath. "Ma, this is getting out of hand. You're making this harder than it needs to be. I don't know what you want from us. We're doing our best." Doing their best. I replayed that phrase twice. It was the kind of sentence that sounded like peace, but carried a sharp edge. The kind of line people use when they don't want to say sorry, but still want the argument to end. I saved the message to a new folder on my phone, Evidence. Not because I planned to use it just yet, but because something inside me said this wasn't over. I didn't cry. Instead, I wrapped my sweater tighter around my shoulders and looked out over the yard. Years ago, Troy used to run through that grass barefoot, chasing fireflies with a jar and grinning like it was enough just to be outside. Now his voice came through cold glass, lined with distance and excuses. I thought of the thousands of dollars I'd given, the hours spent in grocery aisles choosing his favorite snacks, the quiet evenings I'd let them use my car without complaint. And this was where I'd landed, ghosted, blamed, reduced to making things harder. I didn't call him back, didn't text, just let the silence do the talking. Because, for the first time, I saw the truth clearly, not as a shock, but as a pattern. And now that I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. And I wouldn't unhear the sound of that voice memo either. It would stay with me, like a match, waiting for the right spark. The morning of September 17th, I stood in front of my bedroom mirror, still wearing my nightgown, a silk one with lace trim I'd bought for myself the year I turned 60. The glass was streaked with dust near the edges, and for a long time I didn't move, just stared at the woman looking back at me. Not old, not frail, not confused, just tired. And not the kind of tired a nap would fix. My reflection held its ground. There was a calm in my chest, not softness, but steel. The kind that settles in after you've given all your chances away and finally realize it's not your job to be anyone's stepping stone. I whispered it aloud, just to hear it outside my head. No more. 2 hours later, another text came through. Rent due Friday, please. No names, no warmth, just those words. Followed by the familiar heart emoji and a waving hand. A mix of desperation and performance, their usual tone. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my phone and pulled up my contact. Scrolled until I found Cynthia Barnes. The woman had managed my credit union account for over 10 years. She knew how I thought, how I saved, how I gave. When she picked up, her voice was steady but curious. "Miss Denise, been a minute. Everything all right? We need to talk," I said. "In person. Soon." There was a pause. Then, "I'll make time. Come in tomorrow. Noon." I hung up, then walked into the kitchen, opened the drawer where I kept old receipts and passwords, found the manila folder labeled Transfers Troy, and pulled it out. Not to reread it, but to finally act on what I'd known for too long. That afternoon, I took down the engagement photo still stuck to my fridge with a river birch magnet. I didn't throw it away, just placed it in a drawer, face down. It wasn't vengeance I was feeling. It wasn't grief either. It was something quieter. Permission. For years, I'd treated my support like a sacred duty, an invisible cord that bound us no matter how carelessly they pulled. But something had snapped, and not in anger. The next day, I walked into the credit union wearing the same navy blazer I used to wear to court filings. The fabric was a little stiff from disuse, but it still fit. Cynthia met me at the glass door, clipboard tucked under her arm, her sharp eyes softening the moment she saw my face. She didn't ask why I was there, just led me past the check counters to her office, closed the door gently behind us, and pulled up my file. "I want to cancel all recurring transfers to Troy Walker," I said before she could ask. She blinked. "All of them?" "Yes. Effective immediately. And I want to reset all security measures. PINs? Account access? Anything connected to them." She looked at me for a beat longer, then turned to her keyboard. "Understood." The keys clicked steadily as she pulled up the transfers. I could see the list reflected faintly in her glasses, rows and rows of $500 payments, like a trail I'd laid down without ever asking where it led. "I've also removed their name from your emergency contact," she added, her voice low but firm. "Do you want to add someone else?" "Not yet," I said. She nodded again, slid the cancellation form across the desk. I signed without hesitation. She stamped the bottom corner, the red ink soaking in slowly. Final. Outside the glass door, I could see a young couple at the teller window, whispering and checking their balance. They reminded me of how Troy and Brittany used to be, before entitlement overtook gratitude, before they began to treat me like a safety net they never intended to fold up. My phone buzzed before I'd even made it back to the car. "Troy, what happened to the transfer?" Then the calls started. 6 of them. One after another. All from him. I didn't answer. I let them stack up like unopened mail. No voicemails. No explanations. Just panic disguised as persistence. By the time I turned the key in my ignition, I felt something unshackle inside my chest. A pressure I hadn't noticed was there until it was gone. The money wasn't what mattered most. It was the quiet expectation behind it. The assumption that I would always say yes. But I had finally learned how to say something else. No. On September 20th, I walked into the Richmond Public Library carrying a canvas tote packed with folders, a flash drive, and my old paralegal instincts. The smell of paper and dust settled over me like an old sweater, comforting and familiar. Maurice, the library tech, stood behind the desk at the print station, earbuds tucked under his locks. He greeted me with a nod and an easy smile. "Ms. Denise, long time." I smiled back. "I've got a scanning project today. Lot of files. You got time?" He motioned toward the back copier. "Always for you." I took over the corner workstation and spread out my records. 3 labeled folders: bank transfers, communications, expenses. I began feeding them, one by one, into the scanner. Pages slid through with the quiet rhythm of proof being preserved. Venmo screenshots with Brittany's profile picture, date stamped. Rent transactions listed by month. Grocery receipts from as far back as 2022. A PDF printout of the dental invoice I'd paid in full. Even the text messages, downloaded and organized. Each emoji-laced request, each half-hearted thank you. And the voice memo from Troy? I had that too. Exported and labeled voice message sept 16. Maurice came over midway through and helped me compress the files into folders on a sleek flash drive I bought just for this. He even printed labels for each envelope I sealed the hard copies into. "You building a case?" he asked gently, not prying, just observant. I paused, straightened the stack of papers. "Something like that." He gave a single, respectful nod. "Well, you're thorough. Somebody messed with the wrong one." I smiled at that. Just a twitch of the mouth, but it stayed with me. When I got home, I placed the folders in my lockbox. The flash drive went into the fireproof safe. I also emailed a backup copy to myself, with the subject line, "For when they deny it." I sat down afterward, not in anger, but in relief. Not a single tear. Just quiet, practiced focus. I wasn't preparing for war. I was documenting history. My history. The one they'd tried to rewrite with silence and false sweetness. By the time I was done, the final tally was clear: $33,400. The next morning, September 21st, I made tea strong enough to stand a spoon in and laid out the binder on my kitchen table like a blueprint. May came by just after 10, holding 2 lemon muffins and her reading glasses. She didn't ask why she was there, just sat across from me, unwrapped a muffin, and waited. I slid the binder toward her. She opened the first page, flipped slowly through receipts, statements, and screenshots. Her brow creased deeper with each page. "Lord," she muttered, finally looking up. "They've been eating good off you." I nodded. They don't see it that way. To them, it's just what I do. May pressed her lips together, then tapped a red-stamped bank printout. "You're not just cutting them off. You're drawing the map backward, letting them see every step they missed." She got it. That's why I'd called her. At noon, I drove over to New Hope and met Pastor Eubanks in his office. The same framed scripture still hung behind his desk. Let all things be done decently and in order. His eyes were kind, but alert, always weighing what was said and what wasn't. "I need your help," I said plainly. He sat back, fingers laced. "What kind?" "Not spiritual. Practical. I need a space, private but official, somewhere they won't perform." He didn't blink. "You mean Troy and Brittany?" I nodded. "I'd like to call a financial meeting. Not a confrontation. Just clarity, and I'd like you to be there." He rubbed his chin, then said, "Room B in the basement. 6 o'clock Friday. I'll moderate." Before I left, I handed him an envelope. Inside was a 1-page summary of the binder. Itemized expenses, dates, figures. A ledger of years. "You sure you want to do this here?" he asked. "Church is where they told lies. Church is where they'll hear truth." That evening, back at home, I saved a screenshot Brittany had posted to her story. Pink cursive over a selfie. Some people forget who helped them shine. I added it to the folder labeled Narratives. On the morning of September 23rd, I dressed in slacks, buttoned a crisp white blouse, and walked into the Midlothian Turnpike post office with a manila envelope in my left hand and a steady pulse in my right. The line was short. I stepped up to the counter where Mrs. Delaney stood behind thick bifocals and a small stack of outbound parcels. "Certified, please," I said. She weighed the envelope without looking up. "Domestic?" "Yes," I said. 2 recipients, same address. Inside was a typed, signed letter addressed to Troy and Brittany. 3 pages. No fluff, no pleading. Subject: cessation of financial support and revocation of access. I had structured it like a legal notice. Clean margins, double-spaced, direct. The first page outlined every dollar I'd spent in the past 3 years. Total, $33,400. The second page listed my actions to date. Bank transfers canceled, house keys retracted, emergency contacts updated, PINs changed. The third and final page included a personal note, not sentimental, but plain spoken. This is not a punishment. This is a boundary. You chose to exclude me. I'm choosing to protect myself. I enclosed a printed rent ledger. I added a scan of the canceled transfer notice. I even included a photo of the key they'd once used to enter my home, now scratched, with a bold black X drawn through the image. Mrs. Delaney printed the label and slid the receipt across the counter. "You'll get a confirmation once it's signed for," she said, stamping the envelope with a final thunk. I nodded. That's the point. Back home, I logged into my HOA portal and submitted a keyholder update form, removing both names. I also sent a note to Theo, the building superintendent, letting him know only May and Cynthia had current access. No others. That afternoon, Brittany responded to the letter with an email that began, "So you're abandoning your own son now? After everything we've been through?" No apology. No acknowledgement. Just accusation dressed up as hurt. I didn't reply. I opened a new folder on my desktop, Pushback, and saved the message, because what they called abandonment, I called clarity. 2 days later, on September 25th, I returned from the grocery store to find Troy's car parked in front of my condo. Beside it, Brittany's white sedan idled, engine still running. A third vehicle, silver, unfamiliar, sat at the curb, hazard lights blinking. I froze at the bottom of the walkway. Through the front window, I saw movement. Figures in my living room. The blinds were tilted, but not closed. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me with deliberate calm. All three turned toward me. Troy stood by the bookshelf, arms folded. Brittany sat on the couch, clutching her phone like it was a rosary. The third man, maybe late 40s, suit jacket too crisp for comfort, was standing at my dining table, sorting through a stack of my papers. "My papers? What is this?" I asked, not raising my voice. The man stepped forward, extending a hand I didn't take. "Mrs. Walker, I'm Daniel Frost, paralegal with Tilson and Green. I've been asked to assist with a matter concerning your financial stability." Troy looked away. Brittany plastered on concern. "We're worried about you, Miss Denise. You've been acting erratically." I took 3 slow steps into the room. "You entered without permission, using keys I've since revoked." Brittany gestured vaguely toward the table. "We didn't know you'd be home. We just wanted to make sure you were okay." "By rifling through my bank statements?" Mr. Frost cleared his throat. "Given the changes to your financial arrangements, your son and daughter-in-law are exploring options to ensure your long-term welfare. This includes assigning temporary financial oversight, power of attorney." He pulled out a thin folder and placed it carefully on the table like it was a gift. I didn't touch it. Instead, I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and began recording. My voice, flat but audible. "This is Denise Walker. I am of sound mind. I have revoked financial access to all parties present. They are in my home without consent." Brittany stood up fast. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being thorough." I sent a quick text to Cynthia. "They're here, calling police if needed." Then I turned back to the man in the suit. "Take your papers, take your assumptions, and take yourselves out of my house." Because they weren't worried about me. They were worried about the money I had already stopped giving. By Thursday, I had everything arranged down to the minute. The church basement had always been a place of folding chairs, sheet cake, and baby showers, never reckoning. But on September 27th at 6 p.m., it became the stage. Room B smelled faintly of pine sol and old hymnals. Pastor Eubanks unlocked the doors at 5:30 sharp and helped me set up the projector against the cinder block wall. May arrived first, carrying her notepad like a court clerk. Cynthia followed with her briefcase, though she wasn't acting in any official capacity. She just wanted the facts to land clean. 9 chairs circled the room, 1 table in front, where I placed the binder, my laptop, and the folders. Transfers, screenshots, pushback, voicemails. At exactly 6:02, the door creaked open. Troy walked in wearing a pressed shirt. He hadn't ironed himself in years. Brittany followed, hand hooked around his elbow like they were walking down another aisle, this time expecting applause. They looked around, surprised by the crowd. "I thought this was a talk," Brittany said, voice too bright. "It is," I replied, motioning toward the seats. "A financial review. Since you've raised concerns about my well-being, I thought transparency might help." Pastor Eubanks stood by the door, arms folded. Not angry, but alert. He nodded at them like a school principal at a parent conference. Present, impartial, but watching everything. They sat. I powered up the projector and clicked open the first slide. A timeline, May 2021 to September 2024. Below it, a single figure, $33,400. Troy leaned forward. Brittany scoffed under her breath. One by one, I walked them through it. Bank transfers, grocery tabs, emergency expenses, the dental bill, the engagement party, the dress. Each with a receipt, each with a date. Every document projected onto the wall in black and white. Every dollar, I said, was given in love. None was owed, but all of it was real. They shifted, whispered, tried to interrupt. I held up a hand. I clicked again, a copy of the letter I'd mailed, with the certified delivery receipt. Then again, the POA proposal Brittany's friend had brought into my home, captured in a video I played at low volume. Their voices, my refusal, all on record. "This isn't about shame," I said. "This is about record keeping. You wrote a story without me. I'm just adding the missing pages." And for the first time, neither of them had anything to say. At 6:17 p.m., the room fell into a hush, so full it felt sacred. Not angry, not theatrical, just heavy with the weight of finally being seen. I stood beside the projector, remote in one hand, my other resting lightly on the binder's spine. May recorded notes on a yellow legal pad, her pen moving in crisp, silent strokes. Cynthia sat upright, calm and composed, ready to step in if falsehoods flew. Pastor Eubanks leaned against the back wall, hands clasped loosely in front of him like he was guarding something ancient and precious. On the screen was the chart, support by category, total $33,400. Rent, $18,000. Groceries, $5,400. Dental, $1,200. Engagement party, $2,100. Wedding dress, $600. Miscellaneous, $6,100. Each line had receipts to match, time-stamped and backed up in both digital and printed formats. I clicked through them one by one, zoomed in screenshots of Cash App transfers, Venmo notes with hearts and thank yous, photos of gift bags and receipts tucked beneath bows. Troy's mouth was tight, jaw ticking the way it used to when he knew he was cornered. Brittany's eyes flicked between me and the wall like she was hunting for a crack in the presentation. There wasn't one. I opened the final folder, Guardianship Attempts, displayed the letterhead from Tilson and Green, played 15 seconds of the voice recording. My voice. Then hers. Then silence, as the reality of their maneuver sank in for everyone in the room. I looked directly at Pastor Eubanks. "Am I exhibiting signs of cognitive decline?" He shook his head. "No, Sister Walker. Your mind is sound, crystal clear." Cynthia leaned forward slightly. "I can confirm all transfers from Denise Walker's account to Mr. Troy Walker have ceased as of September 18th. Access codes and PINs have been changed." She acted with full awareness and consent. Then I turned to Brittany. From my pocket, I pulled a copy of the original key form she'd signed back in 2022. Beneath it, the HOA revocation stamped September 23rd, 2024. I said nothing more, because the receipts had already spoken. The story they tried to write, about a forgetful, lonely mother, desperate for connection, was now drowned beneath an avalanche of dates, sums, and official stamps. By 8:22 p.m., the sun had dipped behind the tree line outside my condo, leaving everything bathed in the lavender hush of early night. I stood on the front porch, arms folded, watching their silhouettes move down the sidewalk. They hadn't spoken another word since the church basement. Brittany's heels clicked sharp against the concrete, the sound too fast to be composed. Troy followed a step behind her, shoulders hunched, not angry, not sorry, just smaller than I remembered him ever being. I waited until they reached the curb before I called out. "Brittany!" She turned, face stiff, mascara smudged under one eye. I walked forward and held something out in my open palm. It was the old house key, the brass one with the pink glitter sticker she'd added to the top. Only now it was snapped clean in two, the jagged edge exposed like a warning. Her lips parted. No sound came out. "I figured you'd want closure," I said. She didn't take it. Instead, she turned sharply and climbed into the passenger seat. Troy paused a beat longer, eyes flicking up to meet mine. There was no plea in his face, just a dull, hollow kind of confusion, as if he'd woken up to find the well empty and couldn't understand why it had run dry. I nodded once, acknowledgement, not invitation. Then I turned and went inside. The door clicked shut behind me. I locked it, not with dread, but finality, a sound that meant enough. On the kitchen counter, the locksmith's invoice sat neatly folded, $142, paid in full. I'd already emailed the updated code to the HOA and called Theo that afternoon. Security footage confirmed they'd entered once, without permission. That file was backed up too. At 8:41 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Pastor Eubanks, proud of you, sis. You handled that with truth and grace." I replied with just a thank you. Then I made tea, chamomile with a splash of honey, and took it out to the porch, sat in the rocker, let the night surround me. The peace didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Inside, the binder still sat on the table, but it was closed now. Nothing left to prove. No more receipts to gather. What I held now couldn't be stamped or notarized. It was mine, boundaried, documented, dignified.